Ladies and gentlemen, good evening to all of you, and thank you for being here. Tonight, I'm going to talk about something that has intrigued many of us, and that is the fascinating dynamic between two very distinct personality types, the narcissist and the empath. The power struggle between them is often subtle, and yet when it reaches its full intensity, it can have life-altering consequences. A super empath is someone who possesses an extraordinary ability to sense and understand the emotions of others, often to an extent that goes far beyond what most people experience. This heightened emotional perception allows them to see into the depths of a person's psyche, revealing not just surface-level behaviors, but the core of their emotional and psychological struggles. This exceptional gift enables them to perceive things that others might miss, including the hidden vulnerabilities of someone who outwardly seems confident or self-assured. One of the most powerful abilities of a super empath is their capacity to see through the facade that many people, especially narcissists, put up to conceal their true selves. Narcissists often project an image of superiority, power, and confidence, using charm and charisma to gain admiration and control over others. To the casual observer, they can appear almost invincible, someone who commands attention and respect effortlessly. They create a narrative in which they are the hero, the center of attention, the one deserving of admiration and devotion. However, behind this facade lies a much more fragile and insecure individual, one who is driven by a deep fear of rejection, inadequacy, and worthlessness. The narcissist's outward bravado is merely a mask, a shield designed to protect their fragile ego from the emotional wounds they fear might expose their vulnerability. A super empath, however, is able to see beyond this mask. They don't get caught up in the illusion that the narcissist projects, because they intuitively understand that this outward appearance is merely a defense mechanism. The empath is not fooled by the surface-level confidence and self-assurance that the narcissist exhibits, because they are able to perceive the fear and insecurity that lies just beneath it. They recognize the narcissist's need for constant validation, their insatiable hunger for admiration, and their underlying fear of being exposed as inadequate or unworthy. Where others might only see the narcissist's charm or charisma, the super empath sees the deep need for control, the desperate attempts to manipulate others in defeating their fragile ego. This ability to perceive the narcissist's true nature is one of the key reasons why super empaths are uniquely positioned to handle the narcissist in ways that others cannot. The narcissist's core insecurity is not always easy to detect because it is often hidden behind layers of arrogance, entitlement, and grandiosity. However, the super empath has a special gift for noticing the smallest signs, the subtle cues that reveal the truth. These cues might manifest in a variety of ways. For instance, the narcissist may react with anger or defensiveness when their ideas or actions are challenged, not because they are genuinely confident in their own position, but because they fear that being questioned might expose them as weak or incompetent. They may constantly seek reassurance or validation from others, not because they truly believe in their own worth, but because they rely on external sources to prop up their fragile sense of self. The super empath picks up on these emotional signals and understands that the narcissist's sense of self-worth is built on a shaky foundation that requires constant external reinforcement to remain intact. This insight into the narcissist's emotional makeup allows the super empath to view their behavior through a more compassionate lens. While others might become frustrated or even angry with the narcissist's arrogance, manipulation, or self-centeredness, the super empath recognizes that these traits are not signs of strength, but of deep emotional pain and insecurity. The narcissist's need to control, belittle, or manipulate others is a reflection of their fear of being vulnerable, of being exposed as imperfect or flawed. To the narcissist, vulnerability is the ultimate threat because it strips away the illusion of perfection that they have so carefully constructed. The super empath understands this at a deep, intuitive level. And this understanding allows them to engage with the narcissist in ways that others cannot. Rather than being drawn into the narcissist's games or manipulative tactics, the super empath remains grounded in their own sense of self. They do not seek validation from the narcissist, nor do they feel the need to prove their worth or compete for attention. Instead, they maintain strong personal boundaries and refuse to play into the narcissist's attempts to manipulate or control them. This emotional clarity is what allows the super empath to see the narcissist for who they truly are, rather than being taken in by their grandiose self-image or charm. In the face of the narcissist's manipulation, the super empath stands firm in their own identity, refusing to be swayed or intimidated by the narcissist's attempts to undermine or diminish them. This sense of emotional clarity is not only empowering for the empath, but also disempowering for the narcissist. The narcissist thrives in environments where they are able to dominate others and receive constant validation. They are accustomed to being the center of attention, the one whose needs and desires take precedence over everyone else's. When a super empath refuses to be manipulated by the narcissist and instead maintains their own sense of self-worth, the narcissist is forced to confront the reality that their usual tactics are ineffective. The super empath's refusal to feed the narcissist's need for admiration creates a powerful emotional shift, one that destabilizes the narcissist's carefully constructed sense of control. This is why the super empath's ability to see through the narcissist's facade is so powerful. It is not just about recognizing the narcissist's flaws or vulnerabilities. It is about refusing to engage with the narcissist's emotional manipulation in the first place. In a way, the super empath becomes a mirror for the narcissist, reflecting back to them the truth of their own emotional state. When the narcissist is confronted with this reflection, they are often unable to handle it because it shatters the illusion of perfection that they have built around themselves. For the narcissist, this is an incredibly destabilizing experience because it forces them to face the emotional wounds they have been trying so hard to avoid. The super empath, by seeing through the narcissist facade and refusing to engage in their manipulation, unknowingly strips away the narcissist's defenses, exposing their deepest insecurities. This exposure is often more devastating than any direct confrontation because it forces the narcissist to confront their own vulnerabilities in a way that they cannot deny. The super empath's ability to see through the narcissist's facade also provides them with a unique perspective on how to navigate the relationship with the narcissist. They understand that the narcissist is not inherently evil or malicious, but is instead someone who is deeply wounded and afraid of being exposed. This understanding allows the super empath to maintain compassion and empathy while still protecting themselves from the narcissist's toxic behaviors. Instead of getting caught up in the narcissist's games or feeling angry and resentful, the super empath can maintain a sense of detachment, allowing them to interact with the narcissist from a place of emotional clarity and strength. By doing so, they not only protect themselves from the narcissist's manipulations, but also deprive the narcissist of the emotional fuel they need to maintain their sense of control. A super empath's greatest strength lies in their ability to maintain emotional clarity, which is something that allows them to navigate even the most emotionally turbulent situations with a sense of groundiness and self-awareness. This emotional clarity is not just about being in touch with their own feelings. It is the ability to perceive and understand the emotions of others, especially those who might be difficult or manipulative. The narcissist, in particular, represents one of the most challenging emotional dynamics for a super empath to deal with. Yet it is within the super empath's power to maintain their emotional clarity, even when faced with the narcissist's most toxic behaviors. A narcissist thrives on validation. Their self-worth is built upon the admiration and adoration of others. And they continuously seek out opportunities to reinforce their inflated sense of self. They often use manipulation, control, and charm to draw people in, creating an environment where they are the focal point of attention and praise. In the presence of a narcissist, it can be easy for others to lose sight of their own boundaries and emotional needs. The narcissist has a way of making themselves the center of attention, demanding that others revolve around their emotional needs, desires, and expectations. They may even use emotional coercion, guilt tripping, or gaslighting to control the behaviors of those around them. In this way, the narcissist creates a power imbalance where others become enmeshed in their emotional needs, often at the expense of their own well-being. The super empath, however, is not easily drawn into this cycle of emotional manipulation. They are highly attuned to the narcissist's behavior, not just on a surface level, but at a deeper emotional level. While others may become entangled in the narcissist's web of manipulation, the super empath can clearly see the emotional tactics at play. They understand that the narcissist's behavior is a manifestation of deep-seated insecurity and fear of being exposed as inadequate. The narcissist's need for control and validation is not born out of a sense of strength or confidence, but out of a profound fear of rejection and emotional vulnerability. The super empath recognizes this dynamic and is able to maintain a sense of emotional detachment and clarity, understanding that the narcissist's behaviors are a reflection of their own emotional fragility rather than an indication of their superiority or power. This emotional clarity allows the super empath to protect themselves from being manipulated or controlled by the narcissist. While the narcissist may use a range of emotional tactics to try to exploit the empath's natural inclination to care for others, the super empath is able to maintain firm boundaries. They understand that their own emotional needs are just as important as anyone else's, and they refuse to allow the narcissist to undermine their sense of self. The super empath doesn't allow the narcissist to define their emotional reality. Instead, they stay rooted in their own emotional truth, remaining clear about their feelings, desires, and boundaries. This is what makes the super empath so powerful. They refuse to engage in the narcissist's manipulative behaviors, not because they don't care or because they are indifferent, but because they know that maintaining their emotional integrity is the only way to protect themselves from the narcissist's toxicity. Emotional clarity also helps the super empath see through the narcissist's facade. While the narcissist may project an image of invincibility, power, and self-assurance, the super empath understands that this is a carefully constructed mask. The narcissist's arrogance, entitlement, and grandiosity are not signs of strength, but rather of deep emotional vulnerability. The super empath can perceive the cracks in the narcissist's armor and recognizes that the narcissist's bravado is nothing more than a defense mechanism designed to hide their true feelings of inadequacy and fear of rejection. This awareness allows the super empath to engage with the narcissist from a position of strength, knowing that their manipulative tactics are a result of their own emotional wounds rather than an inherent characteristic of the narcissist's personality. In many ways, the super empath's emotional clarity serves as a shield protecting them from the narcissist's emotional turbulence. The narcissist thrives on drama, chaos, and emotional intensity, often seeking out situations that allow them to manipulate others and draw attention to themselves. They may provoke conflict, create emotional chaos, or engage in power plays to maintain their sense of superiority. For others, especially those who are not as emotionally attuned, it can be difficult to avoid being caught up in the narcissist's web. However, the super empath is able to remain calm and composed even in the face of the narcissist's emotional storm. They understand that the narcissist's outbursts, demands, and manipulations are not a reflection of their own emotional reality, but rather a reflection of the narcissist's internal struggle. Because of this, the super empath is able to step back and observe the situation with clarity rather than being emotionally overwhelmed by it. One of the most important aspects of the super empath's emotional clarity is their ability to set healthy boundaries. While the narcissist will constantly push the limits of what is acceptable in order to gain control and validation, the super empath understands that their own emotional well-being must come first. They are not afraid to assert their boundaries and stand firm when the narcissist attempts to manipulate or control them. This ability to say no, to refuse to engage in unhealthy dynamics, is one of the most powerful tools that the super empath has in their arsenal. It prevents the narcissist from taking advantage of their natural empathy and creates a space where the empath can maintain their emotional equilibrium. The super empath's emotional clarity also allows them to recognize when a relationship with a narcissist is no longer healthy or sustainable. While they may feel deep empathy for the narcissist's struggles and pain, they understand that they cannot sacrifice their own emotional well-being for the sake of the narcissist's needs. The super empath is able to make difficult decisions, such as distancing themselves or setting boundaries that protect their own emotional health. This is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. Strength in the understanding that they cannot save or fix the narcissist and that their primary responsibility is to themselves. They recognize that in order to maintain their own mental and emotional health, they must be willing to let go of relationships that are draining, toxic, or abusive. This emotional clarity is also what allows the super empath to disengage from the narcissist's emotional manipulation without feeling guilt, shame, or a sense of responsibility for the narcissist's feelings. The narcissist often thrives on making others feel guilty or responsible for their emotional state. But the super empath understands that they are not responsible for the narcissist's emotional reaction. They recognize that the narcissist's emotional manipulations are a form of control, and that by refusing to engage in these tactics, they can disempower the narcissist and regain control over their own emotional life. The narcissist, in turn, will find it increasingly difficult to manipulate or control someone who is emotionally clear, self-aware, and willing to set boundaries. When the super empath refuses to feed the narcissist's need for validation or to engage in their emotional games, the narcissist begins to lose their power. This emotional clarity, combined with the ability to maintain boundaries, allows the super empath to disarm the narcissist's manipulations and regain control over their own emotional life. Ultimately, it is this emotional clarity that gives the super empath the strength to protect themselves from the narcissist's toxic influence and to maintain their own sense of self-worth and emotional well-being. In reflecting upon the intricacies of the dynamic between a super empath and a narcissist, we arrive at a fundamental truth. While the narcissist thrives on manipulation, control, and validation, it is the super empath's emotional intelligence, clarity, and self-awareness that can ultimately disrupt and dismantle the narcissist's power. A narcissist's ability to control others is largely built on their need for external validation and their insatiable hunger for admiration. They rely on feeding off the emotions of others, distorting reality, and ensuring that those around them stay entangled in their emotional webs. For the narcissist, this is often an unconscious defense mechanism, an attempt to shield their fragile sense of self from the harsh reality of their own insecurities. In contrast, the super empath operates from a place of deep emotional insight, offering a contrasting strength that goes beyond surface appearances. The narcissist's facade is one of supreme confidence, charm, and sometimes even grandeur. But it is a construct, one held together by an inherent fear of being exposed as inadequate. The super empath, through their heightened sensitivity and ability to perceive the emotions of others, sees straight through this facade. While many might be swayed by the narcissist's external display of strength and superiority, the super empath understands the deeper emotional currents at play. They can discern that the narcissist's bravado is not a sign of genuine power, but a reflection of deep insecurity and vulnerability. This ability to see beyond the external to the internal struggle of the narcissist is one of the most powerful tools in the empath's arsenal. By understanding the narcissist's emotional fragility, the super empath knows that the narcissist is driven not by strength but by fear. The fear of rejection, the fear of being exposed, and the fear of vulnerability. What sets the super empath apart from others is their ability to not only perceive these emotional undercurrents, but to remain grounded in their own emotional clarity. The narcissist seeks to create confusion, drama, and emotional turmoil, often trying to pull others into their web of emotional manipulation. They might attempt to gaslight, guilt trip, or even play on the empath's natural compassion to get what they want. But the super empath is not easily swayed. They understand that their emotions are their own and that they must guard their emotional boundaries to maintain their own well-being. While others might get caught up in the narcissist's manipulations, the super empath holds firm in their understanding that they are not responsible for the narcissist's emotional reactions, nor are they required to offer validation or support in the ways the narcissist demands. The super empath doesn't fall victim to the narcissist's need for control because they don't depend on external validation. They are confident in their own sense of self-worth, knowing that their value is not contingent upon the approval or admiration of others. This emotional independence is a cornerstone of their resilience. When the narcissist seeks to manipulate or undermine the super empath, the empath remains unshaken, firmly rooted in their own emotional clarity. This ability to remain grounded, no matter how intense or toxic the situation becomes, is what makes the super empath so powerful. They do not feed into the narcissist's tactics, choosing instead to disengage from the emotional drama and assert their boundaries with confidence and clarity. In doing so, the super empath disrupts the narcissist's cycle of emotional manipulation. The narcissist feeds on the emotional energy of others, but when faced with someone who refuses to engage with their tactics, they lose their power. The super empath's refusal to play into the narcissist's game leaves the narcissist without the emotional fuel they need to maintain their sense of superiority and control. It is not that the super empath fights the narcissist head on, but that they simply refuse to participate in the narcissist's toxic behaviors. This non-engagement is where the real power lies. The narcissist's ability to control others relies on their ability to trigger emotional reactions. When the super empath refuses to react in the way the narcissist expects, they effectively deprive the narcissist of their source of power. It is important to note that the super empath does not become emotionally detached in a way that is cold or indifferent. Their strength lies in their ability to maintain compassion and empathy, even while setting firm boundaries. While they may recognize the narcissist's deep emotional wounds, they do not allow these wounds to be used as an excuse for harmful behavior. The super empath understands that empathy does not mean enabling or excusing destructive behavior. They recognize that the narcissist's actions are a reflection of their own fears and insecurities, but they do not allow the narcissist's emotional turmoil to become their own burden to bear. They maintain the clarity to differentiate between compassion for the narcissist's pain and the necessity of protecting themselves from the narcissist's manipulations. Another vital aspect of the super empath's ability to handle a narcissist is their capacity for detachment. While detachment often carries a negative connotation, in the case of the super empath, it is a powerful tool for self-preservation. Detachment doesn't mean emotional coldness or lack of care. It simply means that the super empath is able to separate themselves from the narcissist's attempts to emotionally ensnare them. This emotional detachment allows the empath to make decisions from a place of reason and self-respect rather than being emotionally swept up in the narcissist's dramatic or manipulative behavior. The narcissist might try to provoke guilt, shame, or even anger, but the super empath's emotional detachment allows them to remain unaffected by these attempts. making it much harder for the narcissist to control them. The super empath's emotional clarity, independence, and detachment ultimately lead to a profound realization. They do not need to defeat the narcissist through force or confrontation. They do not need to engage in the narcissist's emotional games. Instead, they simply have to stop feeding the narcissist's need for validation and control. The narcissist's power comes from their ability to manipulate and dominate the emotional landscape of those around them. When the super empath refuses to participate in this dynamic, the narcissist is left with nothing to fuel their ego. In this way, the super empath quietly disarms the narcissist, exposing their true vulnerability without ever having to engage in the battle that the narcissist so desperately wants. As the super empath becomes more attuned to their own emotional clarity and resilience, they become less and less susceptible to the narcissist's influence. They recognize that their own worth is not defined by the narcissist's approval or disapproval, and they are able to protect their emotional energy from being drained by the narcissist's manipulation. In the end, the narcissist's power fades not because they are defeated through confrontation, but because they no longer have access to the emotional energy they crave. It is in this way that the super empath can render the narcissist powerless. In conclusion, the super empath's ability to destroy the narcissist does not lie in confrontation or conflict, but in their ability to maintain emotional clarity, establish boundaries, and disengage from the narcissist's manipulative tactics. By refusing to feed into the narcissist's need for validation and control, the super empath disempowers the narcissist without ever having to engage in the emotional battle. It is through their emotional independence, compassion, and detachment that the super empath emerges victorious, dismantling the narcissist's toxic influence in their life and reclaiming their own emotional freedom.